I was very cross that the BBC, in their infinite wisdom, decided to ban some of the tracks, and they wouldn't play. They wouldn't play A Day in the Life. Why, I don't know. They wouldn't. And they wouldn't play Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds because this rumour went round that it was all connected with drugs, and Lucy in the Sky actually stood for LSD, which wasn't true, and that it was an album which actually was promoting the use of drugs amongst the young. I was aware of them smoking pot. I wasn't aware that they did anything really serious. In fact, I was so innocent that I actually took John up into the roof when he was having an LSD trip, not knowing what it was.
I never took it in the studio. Once I did accidentally. I thought I was taking some uppers. And I was not in a state of handling it, you know, but I took it, and then I just thought, I was so scared on the mic, you know. I said, what was it, you know? I said, I feel ill. I thought I felt ill, and it was going, I thought it was going cracked, you know, and then I said, I must get some air, and they all took me upstairs on the roof, and George Martin was looking at me funny, you know. And then it dawned on me, I must have taken acid.
So the only place I could take him to get fresh air was on the roof. And we went up there, and it was a wonderful starry night, and he looked up, went to the edge of the 18-inch parapet, and looked up at the stars and said, aren't they fantastic? And of course, to him, they would have been especially fantastic, I suppose. They were just little stars to me at the time.
Paul, how often have you taken LSD?
Well, 4 times. The man at the time, the newscaster, showed up and said, is it true you've had drugs? And I made a sort of lightning decision. I thought, well, I'm either going to sort of try and bluff this. They're at my door. I can't, you know, go, no, go away. Or I'm just going to tell him. And I thought, sod it, you know. But I did talk to him beforehand, and I said, look, you know what's going to happen here? I'm going to get the blame for telling everyone I take drugs. I said, but you're the people who are going to distribute this thing. I said, I'll tell you. I said, but if you've got any worries about this having an effect on kids, then you don't show it.
Well, do you think you have now encouraged your fans to take drugs?
I don't think it'll make any difference, you know. I don't think my fans are going to take drugs just because I did, you know. But the thing is, that's not the point anyway, you know. I was asked whether I had or not. And then from then on, the whole bit about how far it's going to go and how many people it's going to encourage is up to the newspapers and up to you, you know, on television. I mean, you're spreading this now at this moment. This is going into all the homes, you know, in Britain. And I'd rather it didn't, you know. But you're asking me the question. You want me to be honest. I'll be honest, you know.
I don't know. It just seems strange to me because we'd been trying to get him to take it for about 18 months. And then it just seemed funny that one day he's on the television talking all about it.
The problem was it then gave the press a field day to be on all our cases. You know, I personally didn't think it was any of their business. But, you know, once he said it, you know, whoever said anything in the Beatles, the other 3 had to deal with it. You know, which we did with all love because, you know, we loved each other. But I could have done without it myself.
Now, the point about the whole drug scene was the press asked Paul, have you taken LSD? This is how it all came out. Otherwise, we didn't say a word about it, you know? I mean, it was just a personal thing, right?
Well, you see, I feel to this day that, you know, we did take certain substances. But never to a great extent at the sessions. You know, we took a little, but whenever we'd overdid our intake, the music we made was absolutely shit. And you know, we'd go home real happy with the tape, and we'd play it when we got home, and you'd play it the next day, and it was just, every time we come back to record again, we'd all look at each other and say, well, we have to do that again, because, you know, it didn't work. It didn't work for the Beatles to be too deranged when making music.
In America, we could feel what was going on there, even though we were miles away. You could just pick up the vibes, you know.
I was all for going there and living on the hate, you know. I mean, in my head, I thought, well, hell, acid's it, and this is the answer, let's go. I'll go there, you know, and make music and all that. But, of course, it didn't come true in the end. George went over.
You know, I went to Haight Ashbury, expecting it to be this brilliant place, and it was just full of horrible, spotty, dropout kids on drugs in America. It certainly showed me what was really happening in the drug cult. It wasn't what I thought of all these groovy people having spiritual awakenings and being autistic. It was like the Bowery. It was like alcoholism. It was like any addiction. So at that point, I stopped taking it, actually, the dreaded lysergic. I had some in a little bottle, and I put it was liquid. I put it on a microscope, and I looked at it, and it looked like rope. It's like old rope, and I thought, well, I'm not going to put that in my brain anymore.
I was influenced by acid and got psychedelic, you know, like the whole generation. But really, I like rock and roll, you know.
Just one of those things that happened, you know, as life went on.
We'd been into drugs, and we were, the next step then is, then you've got to try and find a meaning then.
That's where I really went for the meditation.
A very popular group.
And they chose Paul's wedding day to bust me on.
Really? No, because George was in my office, and Patty rang saying that Sergeant Pilcher, if that was his name, right, was swarming all over the house at in Isha. And George said to me, well, what should I do? You know, what should I tell Patty with this conversation? And I said, well, have you got his stuff there? Just tell him where it is, George, because they'll find it anyway. You know, save yourself a lot of hassles, you know. And he said, well, he had a bit of grass, maybe a bit of hash in a box on the mantelpiece, right? So he rang Patty and told her to tell him where it was, you know. By which time they'd found a chunk this big in a boot in his wardrobe.
You know, Sergeant Pilcher was gaining great notoriety of just busting pop stars, you know, besides George and Mick and Keith and John, and always was the same cop. Nobody realized, you know, nobody put two and two together.
What happened was there was the kind of social or pecking order that was in the pop world. And the drug squad decided to go around. I mean, this fella thought he was Oliver Cromwell, so he decided to go around and clean up what was going on. And they busted Donovan first. You know, anybody who was in England at that time will remember they bust Donovan, and then they bust the Rolling Stones, and they worked their way up, and then they busted John and Yoko and me.
Sergeant Pilcher's successful career with the drug squad was short-lived. He was later sent to prison for perjury. Sentencing Pilcher to 4 years in prison, Mr. Justice Melford Stevenson said this: "You poisoned the wells of criminal justice, and you set about it deliberately. What is equally bad is that you betrayed your comrades in the Metropolitan Police, a force which commands the respect of the civilized world."
But now my life has changed in oh so many ways. Wapapaluma, the limb bamboo.
Hey, young America, we need to talk. You may think this is uncool. You may even think it is bogus. But I want to tell you about something that has everyone buzzing. Something that concerns mature boys and girls just like you. Something called grass. Not that grass. I'm talking about marijuana. You may have heard of it. You may have seen someone smoking it, like those burnout bohemians or that crazy-eyed custodian at your school. You may have taken a toke or two. But do you know the whole story? Do you know the blunt truth?